Good evening.
Good evening.
Um,
What's your name?
I'm new here, so yes, my name is Beth
Lovely to
Thompson.
meet you.
Good to be here.
Annie. Hi, Annie.
Hi, Erev Tov.
Erev Tov. I don't think we've met before, have we?
I'm not sure. I think I did come to Bet Midrash once. We most of the time we spent in Israel, but my husband got sick in late 2019. He passed away a month ago, so we're
Oh, yeah, I'm so sorry. Baruch Adonai I met.
Good
Here in Vancouver.
in Vancouver, so we never went back. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Anyway, oh, he's Debbie Chavusha. Oh,
He's
hi
Debbie.
Debbie. Okay, let's see.
Hi, Debbie.
Yeah, so anyway, I saw the beautiful new website, and I marveled at the website. And then I got an email that because it was one of the first 5 to
Ah.
comment on it, I'm winning a prize of
Beautiful, beautiful.
to cheer me up. Yeah. It's been very
Okay, Baruch
difficult.
Hashem. נו בשמחות, שרק בשורות טובות בעזרת השם.
Goodbye.
So we'll do, what's his name? We'll do the shiur Leilui Nishmato.
Moshe ben Ronya ויצחק.
Moshe ben Ronya.
רוניה ויצחק, כן.
Okay.
הוא מווינפג במקור.
Okay.
אוי. Debbie, say something.
Hi, Dan. Hi, Gavi.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hi, Rabbi.
Oh, hi, Dan.
You.
Hi, Annie. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you, Dan.
Good. Interesting meeting on Tuesday.
Very, very, yeah.
I had a good one this morning too with my
Hi,
group.
Shlomo.
With whom?
I do the same thing Monday morning with the
yeah.
JCC group.
Right. Hi, Des.
Hi, Des.
It's too bad we missed last week there, Rabbi.
Yes. I take it you have some comments.
Well, yeah, because I mean, this is one of my favorite stories in Torah.
Which one? Shemot or Vaychi?
No, just this recent, the couple of parshas that we've just read recently.
Hi,
And
Josh.
I mean, and the reason for it is that, I mean, not so much the details of the Torah itself, but how it affects us individually or as a family. I mean, to look at the family dynamics, try to understand the dynamics that's happening with Jacob's family. Also, I'm confused by the contradictions that occur. You know, I mean, Joseph, becomes a viceroy, fair enough, but he marries an Egyptian woman. Okay.
Right.
He's given an Egyptian woman, and he has 2 sons that are accepted. They're accepted as brothers to the rest of the brothers. The 2 brothers become half tribes. No
Right.
question that they come from Egyptians. Yet with Abraham, he had an Egyptian wife as well.
No, not Egyptian. He had a Mesopotamian wife.
No, she was Egyptian.
She was Egyptian. Sarai
It was Egyptian, not Sarah.
No,
Oh, the
Hagar.
other one. Oh, the
Yes,
other one.
and after the death of Sarah, he actually, according to Midrash, he went back to,
Yes, he did.
and he had many children with her.
Tura.
Okay, he had many children.
Surah was Hagar, and Hagar was the daughter of Paro.
Right.
Right.
And so the point being is that these children are all brothers to the first boy, if you will, Ishmael.
Yeah, but it used to be patrilineal descent. Then it changed. It used to be by the man, the Shoshel,
It didn't change until hundreds and hundreds of years later.
That's
Okay.
right.
What I'm getting at is the contradiction where on one hand, there's no question as to, Egyptian. In fact, one of the things that Esau did to really offend his parents was marry an Egyptian woman.
Egyptian, exactly.
Okay. So, I mean, so I see the contradiction. Why would they be so offended, in a situation like this? Yet here we are, Joseph marries an Egyptian woman. Further, why does Joseph tell his family, tell him that you want to settle in Goshen? Why does he want to separate his family in Goshen from the rest? What is the intent? Is don't get involved with the Egyptian people, don't get involved with the women, don't. So
Dan, as usual, all very good questions. The truth is, okay, we're just waiting for. Are we frozen?
It's okay. If we started, go ahead.
No, we're okay. We're not.
Yeah, okay. Just everyone's frozen by me. Okay. The truth is, there's much discussion about exactly who the wife of Yosef was. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
All my whole thing is frozen over here. So just 1 second, we can open the door over here.
But that's also very, to me, disturbing, because according to what we read Torah, it's Potiphar's daughter. Potiphar's daughter is given over to Yosef.
Right, that's what it says in the pasuk, exactly. So we did mention in the past that who was the daughter of, or the wife of Yosef. The wife of Yosef was someone called Osnat, and she was actually the result of the relationship between Shechem and Dinah. She was the daughter of that union, and she was sent off to Mitzrayim, and Yaakov put a necklace around her saying she was Jewish, and hence later on, and she was brought up late in the household of Potiphar, the Midrash says, and later on she married Yosef, being a Jewish woman. The daughter of Dinah.
Chamor ben Shechem. Okay.
So Chamor was the father. Shechem was the son.
Isn't it say Chamor ben Shechem? Is it Shechem ben Chamor?
And Chamor.
Toda.
So I don't know why my screen again is completely frozen.
It's black.
It's black? Okay, hold on.
I see you. I see you perfectly fine.
I see you.
I don't see any movement, but I do see you, and it's sort of like.
Okay, hold on a second. I'm just gonna.
All black in my computer.
So, what you're saying, though, Rabbi, what you're saying is this all midrash again?
What I just told you is midrash, correct?
Rabbi, now we can see.
But I know, Dan, you want some hardcore stuff. 1 second, hold on a second. I'm just gonna arrange the Zoom. It should work out. Hold on a second.
Oh, here I can see you now very well.
I'm going to log out and come back in. So hang on a second.
Sure. I don't think you can.
Because you're initiating, you'll turn off everything.
You're the host. I don't think you can.
Well,
I'll try. Let's see what happens.
Okay, let's see what happens.
I can see
Maximum, if you all get logged out, then come straight back in, okay?
Okay. Unless he hasn't been made the host, then he could come back in, but somebody has to allow him back in.
Well, I assume he will.
Not if he's out. He can't, he has to start a new session. It's not, we'll see. We'll see. Anyways, it's too bad that we did miss last week's.
Can everybody see the Rav or not?
I can.
I can see him fine.
Yeah.
No,
I don't
it's
see any
frozen.
movement, but I
It's
see him.
frozen.
Yeah, he's frozen, but I see him.
Frozen, yes, but you can see him, right?
Right.
Oh, it said Debbie Chavusha is the host now, it says.
Who?
Debbie Chavusha is the host. I had a little blip on my screen. Debbie says something. Are you the host?
Yes, Debbie. Debbie Chavush. Debbie. She's not even there right now.
Can you hear me? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm a host.
Very
Hi,
so.
Annie.
Hi,
I think this is what happens. Wait. This is what happens, I think, when the host, the assistant host logs out. I think the first person they can grab onto makes them a host.
שומעים אותי?
שומעים.
אני פשוט מבשלת ארוחת ערב, מה שלומך, אני?
אני משתדלת להתגבר על האסון הנוראי שקרה לי.
שאלוהים ייתן לך כוח, זה לא פשוט.
Okay.
זה לא פשוט, אני מצטערת.
קשה מאוד
Midrash. Hold on.
Okay, I'm sorry, everyone. There was a computer glitch. We're back on. And Baruch Hashem. Okay, so we're moving on. Dan, back to your point. Well, there's much discussion about it. Who she was exactly? Again, nothing concrete in the pasuk other than the fact that it says that she was raised by Potiphar.
No, but it says she was Potiphar's daughter, not raised by Potiphar. Potiphar's daughter.
Sorry?
It says that she was Potiphar's daughter, not
Right,
that she was raised by Potiphar.
Right. Okay. And then often we find this concept of someone being raised and known as the daughter. With regards to Goshen, we'll see. Maybe we're going to discuss it, touch on it a little bit today.
Okay.
Before I start and get to you, Shlomo, I just want to dedicate this shiur le'ilui nishmat Naama's mother, Naama's father, whose yahrzeit is tomorrow night, Avraham ben Aliza, and to the husband, the late husband of
Yes, Matek?
Ben Ronit
I'll make you more, Matek.
Sonia v'Yitzchak.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Tehei Nishmatam Tzorah Tzorah Chaim, and we're going to make the learning be a Ilui Neshama and the memory be for a blessing. Okay, so we're going to start today Sefer Shemot. So first of all, I just want to say we did say that we were going to stop this series based on the fact that we had finished Sefer Bereshit. It was supposed to be on Sefer Bereshit, but by popular demand, people asked we should continue. So we're continuing into Sefer Shemot. Sefer Shemot is the book of Exodus, a fascinating parshiot. I just want to start off and mention that there is something in Kabbalah known as Shovavim. I'm not sure if many of you are aware of this concept. This concept is a Kabbalistic idea known as Shovavim. Shovavim is an acronym for these parshiot. Shemot, Va'era, Bo, Beshalach, Yitro, and Mishpatim. These are all the parshiot of the Exodus, essentially from the beginning of the exile to the end of the Exodus, essentially, where they come out of Egypt, where they go through Kriyat Yam Suf, through the splitting of the sea, and eventually where they get to the point of this whole thing, which essentially was Matan Torah. So there's a lot of this this continuous theme throughout these parashiyot. Ramban begins the whole book of Exodus, Sefer Shemot, with the following Hagdama, with the following introduction. He says, Hishlim HaKatuv Sefer Bereshit, Shu Sefer Yetzira Bechidush HaOlam B'Yitzirat Kol Nutzar. He says that the beginning of Sefer Bereshit, Genesis was the book of creation, the book of mankind, the book of the Avot, who were also kind of the beginning of creation, who set the path. And after all that, we begin Sefer Shemot, the book of Exodus, which essentially is the first galut, the first exile, and essentially the main Exodus, the main Geula, which we keep on relating back to. Coming back to the concept of Shovavim, this period is a period Kabbalistically, with Arizal used to say, where the Jews were in Egypt and they were steeped into Tumah, and this has a great relevance to us today, where a person should appreciate what we can learn from these parashiyot and understand what relevance it has to our lives. We keep on saying that the Torah is not a history book. The Torah is something which has relevance to us. What Dan mentioned before is very relevant. I think I saw from Rabbi Sachs that it's beautiful to see that in Sefer Bereshit, you have the best and the worst of people. You have the most beautiful dedication to Avodat Hashem, to God, and you have the most difficult challenges between sibling rivalry, as we discussed at great length, that's not to be taken simply. We're not simplistic people, and the Bible written, from the hands of God is clearly not some simplistic story. So obviously there's much to delve into. I think we elaborated on that quite a lot the past few weeks. But essentially, more than that, you do find there's so many different human character traits which has to be worked on. And we see, again, the best and the worst of people throughout Sefer Bereshit. The Torah begins, Sefer Shemot, Ve'ele Shemot Bnei Yisrael. Before I start the little bit delving into Rashi to see what's bothering Rashi, a little bit what's bothering us in the parasha, I want to just quickly give a quick recap on Sefer Shemot, on Parashat Shemot, this week's parasha. And I just want to say that even if in general, one doesn't spend the time trying to understand the relevance of the Torah or the relevance of the Torah portion every week, many people, one of my rabbis always used to say that these parashiyot specifically are very important to try and elaborate on, to try to understand and grasp the underpinnings of it. And the reason is because one night a year, essentially one chag, one of the main chagim which we have, which you've all guessed is Pesach, is a time which we actually discuss and sit down and celebrate who we are as a nation. And that's all based around all these parashiyot, Shemot, Vayera, Bo, B'Shalach. These are the main sources for all the stories of the Exodus or the old stories of the exile, where it started, where it finished. On Leil Pesach, we have to start from the lowest point to the highest point. And it's really important to understand the basics, where it comes from, and to try to understand what the pasuk is coming to tell us and what relevance it has to us. So without any further ado, Ve'ele Shemot B'nei Yisrael, a quick recap on this week's parasha. So the Torah begins with a quick recap of last week's parasha, where we left off. We'll discuss that in a few minutes. The pasuk talks about Paro, who has a major dilemma. What should I do with the Jews? The age-old Jewish problem, and where we see anti-Semitism kind of rears its ugly head right at the beginning of the parasha. We'll try and elaborate a little bit how we get to that. We see as we go through. The Jews are persecuted. They are in terrible conditions. And Paro at that stage is not prepared to go all out against the Jews. Rather, he's trying to do it, undercover. So what does he do? He tries, first of all, to bring them in and to knock them physically with hard labor. And then he, meanwhile, on another front, he tells the Jewish midwives, make sure you kill all the Jewish boys. Later on, he goes all out, and he tells them to chuck them in the river, in the Nile, until it becomes essentially dangerous to give birth. Moshe's parents, Amram and Yocheved, are at the time Amram was actually the Gadol Hador, was the lead of the generation at the time. And he actually, the Midrash says, he actually separates from his wife for a period because he felt like it was inappropriate. If this is what's happening with the children, let's not continue. And eventually he comes back. The Gemara, we're not going to go into that now. And he eventually, Yocheved, not written exactly who it is at this point. Pasuk Perek Bet, chapter 2, Vayelech Ishmi Bet Levi, Vayikach et Bat Levi. Doesn't say who it is. Doesn't say who he is. Doesn't say who she is. Interesting. It's Amram and Yocheved, the Gemara says.
And that's in fact, Rabbi, that's in spite of the fact there's a strong emphasis on Shemot, on names, on the significance of names. And suddenly in that first pasuk in Perek Bet, there's the absence of a name.
It's a very, very good point. I'll tell you something else, which actually Rashi points out. Rashi tries to work out how old Yocheved is. If you look at chapter 2, pasuk 1, we're not going to go, I don't know if we have time for this. Rashi says this Midrash which I just mentioned, he got divorced and then he came back. And Rashi points out, Ubat Kuf Lamed Shana Haita. The age of Yocheved was how much? 130 years old. Okay, he said you may work out how old Moshe Rabbeinu was. He was 80 years old when he left Egypt, that we know it says in the Torah.
Yeah.
You work out how many years were they in Egypt, 210 years. Well, please God, in 2 weeks' time, Rashi will grapple with the million-dollar question. How many years were there? Were they in Egypt for 430 years? Were they in Egypt for 400 years, like was promised to Abraham at the Brit Ben Abitarim? Or were they in Egypt for 210 years?
200.
So much discussion. Rashi tackles it in Parashat Bo. We'll get there, please God, close to the time. Very important equation, which you have to know how it works, just a breakdown. But he says Yocheved was 130 years old. I should point out, that being said, as opposed to someone else we all know very well, Moshe is described in the Torah clearly as being born from a woman, clearly being born out of union of marriage. And that is, the Torah actually clearly states how he was born and he is brought up. He's not some son of God or something. There's none of that. He's a human being who can rise to incredible heights, to the level that he can talk pe'el pe' adaber bo, that he can talk to God literally face to face. Again, one of the only prophets who was able to do that. It wasn't like a dream or some sort of vision, rather it was face to face. Yet the mere fact that a mere mortal can be of that level, can be born from a normal marriage and reach such great heights, is truly magnificent and a inspiration for all of us. Anyway, he gets put into the Nile in a basket, as we all know, and Bitya, the daughter of Paro, goes and picks him up. Interestingly enough, or should we say ironically enough, yes, Yossi?
Sorry, just something interesting that I heard. When it says Kol ben hayeor tashlichu, Kol ben hayelod, right?
Yeah.
So explain why hayeora? Why not to kill him with a knife? Why not to do all the other things? They said that in Egypt everyone knew how to do magics and all of those things. So they would do magic to change their boys to girls, or to take a doll and make it a boy and say, okay, this is my ball, kill it. Like it's just a piece of wood that they did magic with. So he said the magic, it doesn't take effect in the water or above the water. So they brought it to the water and see, oh, it's a real boy or not. So that's why Aviyeora Tashlichu. So when it's in the water, you can see what it is for real. Same thing happened.
Muted, Yossi? Yossi muted.
When Eliezer, sorry. So it's same thing happened with Eliezer and Lavan. So when Lavan came to see Eliezer, it says, "Ine omed al agmalim al hamayim." He was standing on the camels on the water.
Al en hamayim, yeah.
Al hamayim, ken al en hamayim. So he said, the Midrash says, he stacked the camels on top of each other on the water, and he and Rachel was on top of the camels, and Lavan couldn't do any magic to kill him.
Very interesting. Go ahead, Midrash. Very interesting.
Yeah.
You have to see what Rashi says. Simple perush, perek pasuk chavbet. Why the water specifically? Again, we're probably not going to get there today. So moving swiftly on. So ironically, I was coming to the point of Moshe Rabbeinu, who essentially was the reason why Paro kind of intensifies his decree and makes sure that all Jewish children, Jewish boys, are thrown into the river. He is actually the one who's brought up in Paro's palace and raised as an Egyptian prince. It's how ironic. And he is going to be the one who's actually going to be the savior of the Jewish people and take them out of Egypt. So that's just, how wondrous are God's ways, how, Moshe Rabbeinu was actually brought up by Paro himself. So,
Rabbi, I have to ask, I noticed that you're referring to Bnei Israel as the Jews. There was no concept of Jews. They're Bnei Israel, and they later become the Ivrim, right? And only much later in history. So it's strange to hear of them referred to as Jews in this context. I mean, they obviously are.
I think you're right. So, okay, a very important point. First of all, in retrospect, we refer to them as Jews. I think you're right. Historically, we would call them perhaps the Hebrews.
Or Bnei Israel.
Avram HaIvri. Bnei Israel, they were the sons of Israel, namely Yaakov, right? But what we know as we became Am Israel was at what stage?
In 48.
Kabbalat Torah.
No.
No, we became ביציאת מצרים.
סליחה, עם ישראל, מתן תורה.
Thank you.
עם ישראל, כאילו ביציאת מצרים, and the ultimate, it culminated in Matan Torah.
So, okay, that's another discussion. Exactly what happened at Yetziat Mitzrayim, when they came out of Egypt, and what happened at Matan Torah. When did they become Am Yisrael? So, but the reality is they became Am Yisrael.
מתן תורה, כי עם אחד כאיש אחד.
That's the reality, exactly.
כי עם אחד כאיש אחד.
You're right. איש אחד בלב אחד. Right.
תן לך את זה.
Right. Regards to Avram HaIvri, I don't know if I've mentioned in the past, they were called the Ivrim, I'm not sure why, Myra.
From ever.
Because עברו את הירדן.
From what?
כי עברו את הירדן.
No.
Everyone is on one side. No, everyone is on one side, and Abraham is on a different side with their belief with one God.
Avram HaIvri. Avram was the one who was changing the course and direction of the world. Everybody else believed in idol worship, and he was the one that believed in one God. When was Abraham HaVinu born?
Aram
Naharaim.
When? What year?
Ur Kasdim.
What year was he born?
Ur Kasdim is not the name of a town?
No, what year was he born? No, you're right.
What year? לא יודעת.
Very easy to remember. Dan?
One question when we're talking about the
1 second, I want to know the date. No, when?
I think
the date.
about 1,000 years. 1,000 years like La Bria.
No.
Around, yeah, something like that.
No. Annie, you said it before.
20 דורות from הבריאה.
Annie, you said it before. 1948. Don't ever forget that. Not funny. Abraham Avinu was born in 1948 to Briat HaOlam, to the creation of the world. And essentially, that's when he established the concept of being Abraham HaIvri, the one who is separate, different to the rest of the world, different direction. The whole world is one side and he's on the other side. So you're right, Ellen, going back to your point, you're right, at this point, they're actually Hebrews. Interesting to note, they are Bnei Israel. They have a certain element of connection to their forefathers, to the Avot. In fact, the Midrash, the Gemara, says that they learned certain things. When Moshe Rabbeinu, later on in the parasha, comes and presents to them, or asks God, how will they know that I'm the guy? And God says, don't worry. He gives them a couple of signs to show them. But essentially, he says, give them this code name. And what's that? Based on the fact that there was a Mesorah, there was a tradition from Yaakov to Yosef, or from Yaakov to Yosef to Levi, to their children, his children, who will know that when the Savior of the Jewish people will come and say, Eheyeh Asher Eheyeh, you know that he's the chosen one, because no one else knew it. So there was clearly a certain tradition of, we're going to come out of Egypt, and one day we're going to do something. There was stuff going on there, but you're right. At this stage, there weren't Bnei Israel per se.
They were Bnei Israel. They were Jews.
No, they were Bnei Israel.
They were Bnei Israel. They came Jews at Matan Torah.
They were Bnei Israel. Yes, that's what I said.
Actually, they became Jews after the tribe of Judah. After way later.
Way later.
Yeah, Jews, as in Judah, you're right.
Judah.
Okay. But Israel, what we know it, they came at Matan Torah. I should point out that also answers one of the famous difficulties. I think the Ramban asks, many Rishonim ask, Amram's wife, Yocheved, if you do the breakdown, she was actually Amram's
niece.
Auntie. Thank you.
Amram's auntie?
Yeah, Amram's auntie.
I misunderstood.
Many ask how he can marry his auntie, and one of the answers is because he wasn't Jewish yet. That's one of the simple answers.
No, but it's before Matan Torah anyway.
That's right, because he wasn't Jewish yet. So he was before Matan Torah, which is the same answer what they answer with Yaakov Avinu, why he married two sisters. It's one of the simpler answers which they answer all these problems.
Wait. Okay, I got a quick question then.
Sure.
And this is another one that bothers me. The circumcision, Brit Milah, isn't that entering the covenant? Doesn't that make you a Jew?
No, makes you
Can I ask the rabbi?
The truth is, you're getting into a very, very deep discussion.
No, give me the shallow part. Give me the shallow answer.
Sorry?
Give me the shallow answer. I don't want to.
Okay, so the simple answer is like this. I mean, what is all this business? Are they Jews? Are they not Jews? I mean, they're keeping mitzvot. They're not keeping mitzvot. Avraham Avinu is doing Brit Milah. Yitzchak and Yaakov, they're studying some sort of Torah. What's going on over here? You know, what is it? And the answer is, on a simple answer, is that the Avot kept the Torah even though they weren't commanded to, but they kept what we know as the Torah. In fact, the Gemara says they kept even the very minimal mitzvot. But again, a discussion for another time.
Who kept the Torah?
The Avot, the forefathers.
Our forefathers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to suggest that everybody will mute himself or herself and let the rabbi speak. And then if you have a question, raise your hand, because otherwise we haven't made one point and it's already 7:30.
That's why it's a lively discussion. That's good. I understand what you're saying, Shlomo, yes, but I mean, I have the question for the rabbi. So the point being, the answer is the Brit Milah was that entering the covenant, making them Jews or making them whatever we at that point in time?
I think the simple answer is they were entering the covenant because he was actually commanded by God.
Yes.
Did it make him Jewish? The answer is there's no concept of being Jewish yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. No, fair question. And the truth is, all the questions are very relevant because these are all issues which come up consistently throughout the parashiyot. So yeah, I definitely encourage questions. Moving on with the parasha. Moshe grows up, and he sees the Vayar b'sivlotam. He has that Vayigdal Moshe. Moshe grows up straight away. What does it mean? He grows up. He matures in understanding the compassion for his brethren, and he kills the Egyptian. He gets he's about to be executed as a result, and he runs away to Midian. At Midian, there's a story over there with Yitro's 7 daughters. There's a bit of an issue there with the children. Maybe we'll see if we can grab onto that a little bit later. Basically, again, he comes out and he eventually marries Tzipporah. Tzipporah is the youngest daughter of Yitro, and he eventually has a son called Gershom. Meanwhile, the king, Pharaoh of Egypt, dies, and the issues get accentuated to a much higher level, to the point that God is deciding to reveal himself. And then is the famous pasuk, which talk about Moshe Rabbeinu is in the desert, and he is finally the story of the burning bush. Burning bush, this is already Perek Gimel, chapter 3, and Vasne inenu ukal. Moshe Rabbeinu decided to analyze. Very important, as Foreigner says. Sometimes you have to see a situation which is not normal. You have to stop and think. Nowadays people don't think. You get spoon-fed, whether it's Netflix or even in Netflix, they tell you what you should be watching. But this is where we're holding today. We don't think, but if we have the opportunity to see a situation and analyze, that is why Kadosh Baruch Hu chose Moshe, and he tells them, I'm going to basically choose you to save the Jewish people and take them out of Egypt. Moshe Rabbeinu had a whole argument. Yes.
What's the explanation for him married Tzipporah, which is not really Jewish?
Good question. Again, back to our Jewish issue. Not much of an issue if you take on the opinions of those Rishonim that there was no such thing as Jews, only have Matan Torah. The question, back to you, Dan, about if they kept all the Torah, how could they do these things, is where the point of contention is.
Absolutely. Right. How can Yaakov marry 2 sisters if
everyone deals with it? The Ramban, there's a longer Mishneh Melech about it. There's much discussion about that. The Chidah talks at length about it. Again, that requires a whole discussion in its own right.
One of the answers is that because they become Gio, because they did Giyu, they it's not become like they're not sisters anymore. Because when you do Giyu, you're disconnecting you from your family, the original family.
Right.
Well,
yeah, we can always. Okay, I'm not going to answer. Go.
Okay. Again, it's a much longer discussion. I don't think it would do justice to say it in a nutshell.
Exactly.
Okay. The snare. They move on with the burning bush. By the way, where was the burning bush? Where was the location of the burning bush? Anyone know?
Chorev.
in the desert.
Near Sinai, isn't it? Near Sinai.
Anyone know?
Chorev.
Tikva.
Well, I've got a very clear clue for you in
In the
Pasuk Yud Bet.
It's what?
Pasuk Yud Bet, chapter 3, Pasuk 12.
תעבדון את בהר הזה, זה חורב.
Tavdun et Elohim al har hazeh. What's that? You will serve God
50 days. Nun.
50 days later on this mountain. What's this mountain?
Har Sinai.
Har Sinai.
No, that's what I said.
That's all right. I didn't hear you.
That's okay. I just take credit.
Thing I mentioned once, there is a fascinating thing. I've seen it myself. If you look at the rocks of what they call Har Sinai today, now that's also under discussion. Sam is not here to tell us, but if you break the rock in any direction, it's beautiful because you see an image of the burning bush. Have you ever seen it? I wish I would have one. I used to have such a rock. It's incredible. You can cut it in any way, and the rock's inner makings, you can look it up on Google. You see, it's beautiful. Anyway, moving on.
But historically, isn't there some question about, in fact, that there is such a thing as Mount Sinai? According to some rabbis, there was no such thing. It was like 8 foot in height or whatever is the difference between the idea of Moshe going up and receiving Torah versus a real mountain per se. In other words, there's no historical evidence for it to say, yeah, this is Mount Sinai.
Yeah, it's like everything. There's much discussion on locations. You know, people like to figure out exactly is it the one we have? Is it not? That's again, we'll leave that to the archaeologists. Going back to the parasha, so Moshe had a struggle and tells God, "I'm not the right person." You know, after the whole thing, and Hashem's not very happy with him. Eventually, he gets upset with him. He says, listen, okay, if you don't want, you're going to go with Aharon. Aharon, your brother, will be the one to do it. And you'll just go with him. Okay, so he'll be a spokesman kind of thing. Moshe Rabbeinu takes his wife and kids, and he goes.
Now you're getting that. Yeah. You're getting the key point here. I don't understand what happens next. This concept that he's going back, and because of his children, God almost kills Moshe.
Right. Okay. That's a
very disturbing.
Different discussion. Needs a focus. We can't cover everything. Yes, that story is a complicated story. What happened with the Brit Milah with Tzipora, and why didn't he do Brit Milah before? Why suddenly Tzipora has to be the savior over here? Again, much discussion. Anyway, they eventually come in front of Paro.
Oh, so he's skipping. Okay.
And they say to him, Shalach et ami, yachog lo b'midbar. God says, send the Jewish people out, or send the nation out, and they're going to celebrate. Separate.
I have a question.
Again. Sorry?
I have a question.
Go on.
Does Paro recognize that this is Moshe that was in the palace?
Oh, the Pasuk says. Pasuk, okay, we're up to chapter Hey. Perek Hey, chapter 5, Pasuk Aleph, Achar ba'u Moshe ve'Aharon. Vayomru el Paro, Moshe and Aaron says, Nu, koma Hashem lokei Yisrael shachtam v'chog b'midbar. Move, yeah?
No, I'm asking, is Paro, and does he know that this is the guy that...
Oh, does he know that he's his prince, his kid?
Yeah.
It's a different Paro. It says the other one died.
Baruch.
That's correct. The old Pharaoh died.
It said, the Pasuk before that, the reason why Moshe left, ki metu ha'anashim ha'mevakshim et nafshecha. Discussion exactly who that means, who that's referring to, but it says in the pasuk later that Paro actually died. Right? That's when I'll just point it out to you. That's when God came to Moshe and revealed himself, that is Pasuk just before the snare. So it's Perik Bet, chapter 2, Pasuk 23. Vayamot melech Mitzrayim, v'yanchu b'nei Yisrael min avodah v'yidaklu, etc. So he actually died. Okay, moving on. He comes in, Moshe and Aaron say to Paro, listen up, you got to send them out. Paro says, excuse me, who's God? He's not in my history book. I've never met him before. Number one, and I'm not interested in listening to him, and I'm definitely not sending him to do that. They say, well, he asked to send out for 3 days. Again, separate discussion why he only asked for 3 days. I mean, if this whole thing was kind of going to be the climax and they're just leaving for good, what's this whole 3 days which we kind of keep on going on about?
Exactly.
Again, we have to deal with that. Paro's not very happy. If you note, I once saw a whole thing where they equate much of the cruelty, what happened in Egypt, to what happened with the Nazis, how they tried to crush rebellion, how they made sure they didn't have time to think. They would wake them up very early. They would give them very little food and make them do, harsh labor. And Paro says, okay, these guys clearly have too much time to think. I'm worried about a revolt. So you know what? No more bricks. Moshe and Aaron come out with these fancy ideas. Enough. No more bricks. You're going to work even harder. You don't have time to think. Yossi.
You remind me, one of the reasons they say that Bnei Israel stayed only 210 years and not 400 years is because the Egyptians worked them so hard, like double the time. Instead of 8 hours, let's say 16 hours. So it was cutting the 400 to actually only 210.
Right.
From the hard labor.
Right. So so that's one of the opinions is, why was it only 210, not 400? Because of the cruel labor. How many years was it very cruel? 86 years. How do we know? Because Miriam was born 86 years before. And Miriam's name was Mar, right? She was, we eat maror on Pesach because we remember of the affliction of what the Vaymarut Chayahem, right? So Miriam was the epitome of that. So she was, for the last 86 years, it was very, very extreme, the cruelty of the Egyptians to the Jewish people. Okay, or to the Hebrews. Okay, coming back to our point, Nirpim and Nirpim, and they really get angry with Moshe and Aaron. Just try and go into that mode. You can imagine the Jewish people, the Hebrews are pushing themselves, going, working, and the hardships and the cruelty of the labor. And suddenly Moshe and Aaron come in and say, don't worry, it's all going to be good. We're going to take you out, and God is here to take you out of Egypt. They go into Pharaoh. Paro says, you're messing around, no more bricks. So not only they don't have bricks, not only the labor, they have to make the bricks from scratch.
Yeah, no more straw.
No more straw.
Right.
So then that's exactly what happened. So you can imagine the next time they confronted Moshe and Aaron, they say, just relax. Just
stay out of it.
Just keep out of it, right? That's the pasuk in Vayifgeu et Moshe, pasuk Perek Hey, chapter 5, pasuk Chaf. Vayifgeu et Moshe et Aaron, tzarim likratam etztam et Paro, pasuk 21. Vayomru alehem yireh Hashem alechem yishpot asher yivashtem et rechenu b'nei Paro b'nei avadav v'tetcher b'yadam meragenu. Really, you really messed us up. Please don't try and help us anymore. Just leave us alone. Moshe Rabbeinu at that point turns around to God and he says, Hashem, lama re'ota lama zeh shlachtani. Why do you send me? You're just making it worse for them. V'atzel lo itzalt et amecha. Chapter 6, in the closing pasuk in the parasha, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, ata tireh asher eseh leParo. Hashem says to Moses, you're going to see what I'm going to do to Paro. Ki biyad chazaka yishalechem. I'm going to take them out with a hardened hand, with a strong hand, biyad chazaka yishalechem ha'atzor. And with a hardened hand, I'm going to basically take them out of Egypt. I'm going to make Paro send them out. And with that, we finish off essentially just the recap. It's 7:44, and we haven't yet started the class. So just a little bit of a beginning of a discussion, and I just want to raise one or two points to ponder, and let's see where we go with this. So just the very beginning of the parasha. So chapter Aleph, chapter 1, pasuk 1. Ve'ele shemot bnei Israel habaim Mitzrayim. And ve'ele, vav mosif al inyan rishon, and these are the names of the children of Israel who came to Egypt, habaim Mitzrayim. Et Yaakov, ish ubeto ba'u. With Jacob, each man and his household came. Uben Shimon Yehuda Yisachar Zebulun Binyamin Dan Naphtali Gad Asher. Vayikol Nefesh Yotzei Yaakov 70 Nefesh. Yosef Hayav Mitzrayim. And all the persons who emerged from Jacob's loins were 70 souls. Joseph was in Egypt. Yamat Yosef V'chol Echav V'chol Dorahu. And Joseph and his brothers and the entire generation died. Okay, any questions? I've got a couple of questions. First of all, ve'ele shemot b'nei Israel. What's vav? Ve'ele. Question, and these were the names. And this is a brand new book. Start of a book, and question number one. Question number two is, if I was, so 1 second, what are you going to tell me? We're connecting this book with the last book. We're recapping what happened at the end of last week's parasha. You should just know 70 souls came down to Egypt. Yeah, Yosef was included in them. And you should just know that now we're at a new stage. They've all died. So kind of a quick recap before we start the new book, which is kind of normal. By the way, for the Israeli speakers amongst us, how would you say? I would say ve'ele shemot bnei Israel habayim Mitzrayim im Yaakov. What's et Yaakov? With Yaakov, not et Yaakov.
Actually, in modern Hebrew, when you want to say two partners, you say Yaakov et Nachshon, for instance. It means Yaakov and Nachshon.
Yeah, but we're we don't want to say and. We want to say who came with Yaakov.
It's
right?
very clear what is this et.
No, how about?
It's very
Is it a question or not a question?
big
Oh,
question.
Rabbi, I think
Debbie.
et receives the direct object. If you think of the grammar in English, you have the subject, and the et is always the object is receiving the subject.
Yeah, but it's a very unusual
But
sentence.
it doesn't fit in the pasuk. Again, ve'ele shemot b'nei Israel. These are the names of the children of Israel. Habaim Mitzrayim. Okay, 1 second. Before I get to the et, sorry, I forgot the main question. Habaim, who are coming? Who are coming? They came already. They actually
They're
died.
already there. They're already there.
They're already there. They even died. We're talking about the death. What's Habaim, who are coming down?
But the et.
But that could be taken in past tense too, Rabbi. I mean, it doesn't say that it's a translation that's not correct. I don't know about the Hebrew, but
The Hebrew doesn't make sense. Habaim, who are coming in a future or present or future tense.
if that's what it says, I agree.
There is a suggestion that et Yaakov is because of Yaakov.
Oh, okay. You're already giving me Pirushim. I don't mind. But
Yeah, but
the question is there.
Abayim is not so bad, but et is not connected to the sentence at all. It's very
Because of Yaakov. Because of Yaakov, they got there.
Yeah, but maze et.
Okay, so both questions are valid questions. Funnily enough, Rashi doesn't deal with any of them, so I'm not sure if we should really tackle it at this point. I won't leave you hanging. Rabbi Hirsch says a beautiful Perush. He says, instead of the more common word im, we use the word term et, which implies that they were intimately attached to Yaakov. He said that is the strength of Yaakov, of Israel's strength and survival. He said, although each son had his own family, but they all remained united with Yaakov. It'd be like he says, like a branch growing from a stem. So it's kind of like one package. Et Yaakov. They were all in it together that they came down. A bit like what Shlomo's saying, they came because of Yaakov, with Yaakov, as like one package. Habaim, what's that point? So this really leads me on to my next point. So So okay, first of all, what's bothering Rashi? Ve'ele Shemot b'nei Israel, first Rashi. Rashi quickly jumps in, he says, Af al pi sheman'am b'chayem bishmotam, even though he already counted them by the name in their lifetime. Again, what's Rashi's problem? He says, first of all, what's the verb? What's the vav? And why are you repeating it? So there's clearly some sort of connection. So Rashi says, you know what? It's the and is connecting the last parasha with this parasha. Problem is, if you look at the last parasha, we know exactly who was there, who they were, and why they came. So what's the continuation? Why the repetition? We know the Torah is very minimalistic. Says Rashi.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
no, I would just say, this is maybe the point that they've been starting to be called Bnei Israel. We start from this point on, they've been called Bnei Israel. The whole Jewish nation is called Bnei Israel, Bnei Israel, Bnei Israel, Bnei Israel.
Shlomo, let me ask you a question. Look at Pasuk Aleph. Shemot b'nei Israel, habaim Mitzrayma, et Yaakov. Very strange thing. Yaakov is referred to as Yaakov.
Yeah.
And Israel in this pasuk. Very, very strange.
No, that was not what I was just saying. I was just trying to say the first part of the pasuk, ve'ele shemot bnei Israel. So because we're starting a new book, we say from now on, this is who Bnei Israel are.
Okay, I could.
You don't have to.
No, it's a very nice pirush, and what you could say is, going forward, this is the direction we're going to. Don't forget, the whole Exodus is coming because what's the first thing Moshe Rabbeinu? People forget this. What did Hashem say at the snare, the burning bush? He says, you should know the reason why I'm taking the Jews out, because Tavdun et Elohim al har hazeh, because you're going to go and in 50 days after they come out, they're going to serve God on this mountain. They're going to get the Torah.
Yeah. אבל זה יותר מאוחר. הוא אומר, ויאמר אנוכי אלוהי אביך, אלוהי אברהם ואלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב.
Yeah, that's later on. I agree.
אבל זה יותר מאוחר. איך זה נקרא פה בני ישראל?
I agree. You're right. So, Shlomo, it's a beautiful idea. Whether it's that's the real perush in the pasuk, shivim panim la Torah. You have many ways of translating, but in simple pshat, which this class is really simple pshat of the pasuk, because again, we said last time, we said the Torah would never say something in a type, in a form or manner which can be misinterpreted, and the fact that the Torah says it in a certain form must be that there's something to learn out the way the Torah says it in a simple level. And that's why we said Rashi is always coming lefaresh pshuto shel mikra. Rashi is not coming to say some deep Kabbalistic meaning, because Rashi is coming at base level. What does base level come to teach me? Because that base level is so relevant, because that needs to teach me today, because it's not a history book. So it must have some serious meaning. Okay, let's move on, because we're less than 8 minutes to finishing time. We have Vayamot Yosef. Okay, just finish the Rashi. The Rashi says, Afal pi shmanam b'chayim b'shmotam, shmanam b'chayehem, b'shmotam chazamanam b'mitatam. So again, Rashi's struggling with this problem. Why the and? If we're already trying to connect the two, why the repetition? Says Rashi, you know why the repetition? Because God loves them. And lahodia chibatam shenimshalu lekochavim. Note the interesting connection to stars. Don't forget, in the dreams of the Yosef, they were known as stars. Because when you love something, you compare it to stars. We had this connection a while back as well. This connection where HaKadosh Baruch Hu continuously counts those who he loves. And that's why you find throughout the Torah, in Bamidbar, he repeatedly counts the Jewish people when they're actually the Jewish people. Just interesting observation from Yaakov Kamenetsky. He says that stars are only come out at night, right? I mean, or only visible at night, right? So all the time that Yaakov was still around in his lifetime, the Shvatim, his sons, were really nobodies. Once they are now, Yaakov has passed away, now the Shvatim shone. As long as the Shvatim, as long as the stars, as long as the stars come out in the night was a time of symbolic to Galut, to exile. In as long as the Jewish people were still able to connect to Yaakov, and as long as the Jewish people were still able to connect to Yosef, in as long as the Jewish people were still able to connect bechol hador hahu, to the entire generation, previous generation, then even though they were in exile, the stars still shone. But Vayamot Yosef, pasuk 6, v'chol echav, v'chol hador hahu. Yosef passed away, like already passed away last parasha. V'chol hador hahu, and the entire generation passed away, all the 70 people that came down originally, and now a new challenge befell the Hebrews. What happened? Now they are entering a new phase where they don't really have that connection to the last generation, and now they're on their own. Once they're on their own, next pasuk, pasuk 7, Ubnei Israel paru, vayishretzu, vayirbu, vayatzmu bim'od me'od, vatimaleh ha'aretz otam. And the children of Israel were fruitful, teamed, increased, and became strong, very, very much so, and the land became filled with them.
Rabbi, why are they using so many verbs?
I was waiting for that question.
You know, and ishretzu is not really a nice one to describe.
Fantastic point. So thank you. I was waiting for both those points. Interesting to note that there's so many of these things that there seemed to have been something out of normal common order, if you want. This was not normal what happened. They multiplied and were fruitful to a very elaborate number, which will bring us on to the next pasuk in a minute. And Rashi says, Vayishretzu sounds to be also, Vayishretzu is sounds like shratzim. Shratzim is, how do you say in English?
Well, the verb would be they swarmed.
Swarm, thank you. When you talk about swarming, what do you usually refer to?
Sherets.
Bees.
How do you say that in English?
Insects.
Thank you. Insects, swarm of insects. You know, we talk about the locusts, the swarm of locusts. You know, what's this Vayishretzu? You talk about people like that? And not just people, it's about the Hebrews. Sforno points out, Vayishretzu is Natul Darkei Shratzim. They started leaving what they came for. They started going out. That means, back to your point, Dan, at the beginning of the class, Yosef wanted to keep them in Goshen contained because they were there for a purpose. They were there in Galut to make sure they maintain what their traditions were from Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, be there for the 400 years, stroke 210 years, whatever you want to call it, and go back and come out as whole as they came in. As long as the generations were intact, previous generation, the cap was on it. Once the generations passed, the cap came off, and the Jewish people started swarming in all different directions. Swarming is not necessarily a nice way to say things because they didn't go in the best of ways.
Okay.
Which led us to our next pasuk. Vayakom melech chadash al Mitzrayim asher lo yadat Yosef. Which is very ironic, or not ironic. This is essentially what happens always in Galut. Someone said, I once heard from someone, if you look through the Jewish generations, he said, you go through history, Jewish history, you'll find approximately every 70 years, it works like this. The Jews are downtrodden.
They rise
and
up.
They rise. They become the wealthiest, they become the most connected, and they become thing, until they rise to the top. Anti-Semitism rears ugly head right at that level. Suddenly they don't know the Jews, they don't want to know who they are. Suddenly the Jews they're not Canadians, they're not British, they're not Americans. They should go back to where they come from. And then there's persecution, and then they get checked out of the country, or whatever, and then until the next rise. And then approximately every 70 years there's an up and down, if you look at it. that Rav at the time said he thinks after the Holocaust, he believes there won't be a physical Holocaust anymore. He said because we are too weak nowadays to be able to handle a physical Holocaust, we won't come out intact. So he says, hence, he thinks there'll be more of a spiritual Holocaust where people have challenges in spirituality as a type of, to get us back into reality. But essentially, the second they started veering off the path, they needed a bit of a smack to get back. So this is suddenly Vayakom pasuk chet, pasuk 8, Vayakom melech chadash al Mitzrayim asher lo yadat Yosef. There was a new challenge. There was a new Pharaoh who didn't know Joseph.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Sorry, was it a new Pharaoh or was it the same Pharaoh
Rashi,
with the new view?
Says Rashi, good question. Vayakom melech chadash, says Rashi, Rav u'Shmuel, two opinions in the Talmud. Chad amar chadash mamash, one says it means a new king in literal sense. And the other opinion was it was the same king who ruled during the lifetime of Yosef, but he just issued new edicts. He was a new type of paro. He kind of forgot about Yosef. Why did Rashi say this point? Because it's very strange. Usually what happens, you say the king was the king, and then he passed away, Yaakov Melech Hadash, and a new king came out. But here it doesn't say that. It suddenly says the Yaakov Melech Hadash on Mitzrayim, a new king came about. What happened to the last guy? So either he was banished, he was excommunicated, he was taken off.
Murdered.
Well, murdered, who knows what it was, but it doesn't say that.
But it's not relevant. It's not relevant. What's relevant is that it's somebody who didn't know Yosef. That's what's relevant.
Oh, so, right. But if you say that he wasn't someone that had died, so what do you mean Melech Chadash? So Rashi says, Shenitchadshu Gezerotav. That you're right. What does it mean, Asher lo yada et Yosef? What says Rashi? Asa atzmo ki'ilu lo yado. He made himself as if he didn't know Yosef. That means,
why is it necessary to do that? It's very, very easily to think that Paro died, that the new Paro clearly did not know Yosef. We're looking for the pshat, that will be the pshat.
No, Rashi doesn't make sense because
Rashi says that it's actually the decrees that were different. It's the same man.
I know what it says.
Why did Rashi say that?
Why is it necessary to say that?
Because every time in the pasuk always elaborates Vayamot Vayakon. Look at the last, later on when the next king died, there was a new one put up. So there's a bit of a change in the story over here, in the narrative. So Rashi says there is two opinions. Again, you can take whatever one you want at this point. We're going to have to close.
It's interesting.
I just want to point out one interesting point. The next pasuk is Paro has a dilemma. He's faced with a national calamity of the Jews are taking over. Now, we paint Paro as a terrible guy. The question is, which I want to ask you and maybe leave you with, is, first of all, is Paro that bad? He's got a major issue. These Jews, they're taking over. Rashi says actually, Shayu yoldot shisha bekeres echad. Actually, we're having births as 6 children from one womb. Every single pregnancy was 6 children.
Right.
It was getting crazy.
Okay, can I add here? Historically, Egypt at this point had many wars outside of their nation. They were a strong nation, but they had many wars. The fear was that the Hebrews at that time could develop as a fourth column. In other words, they could take side with some of their enemies of Egypt, which is what Pharaoh feared. And therefore, this is why the action started in this case, because they were at war on many occasions with their neighbors.
So you just strengthened my question. So seemingly, from a military perspective, Paro had a point. Havanitchak malo, pen yirbe. Vayaki tikren milchama nosaf gam wal sanen milcham banu. Ve ala min haaretz, pasuk 10. They have a problem. Perhaps war will come, people will come, they'll take the other guy's side, and they're just going to overthrow us.
Exactly.
Seemingly, from a military perspective, Paro had a very good point. Is that a bad thing or is that a good thing? That means we paint Paro as a terrible guy, terrible tyrant. Maybe not. Maybe, okay. I agree, very quickly kind of escalated to not normal levels of cruelty. But at that point, at this stage, was there anything wrong with Paro? I'll just, again, I'm leaving you to the question this week, just because we don't have time. I'll give you a bit of a hint. It's interesting to note, I know, first of all, it's interesting to note that Moshe Rabbeinu, when did he leave the palace? When the story happened that he left the palace, he started seeing people, and he had to run away. So it's machloket. Rambam says he was 12 years old. Other Rishonim say he was 20 years old.
20? I thought he was 40 years old. 40 years old, wasn't he?
12 or 20, the Rambam and Rashi. Maybe there's other opinions.
Okay.
It's interesting to note that when he comes back to Egypt, how old is he? He's 80.
He's 80. But he was out there for 40 years.
So the question, well, it depends how many years you want to put it, 40, 60, or even more than that. But those years, again, are not discussed. We don't know anything about Moshe Rabbeinu during those years. There is Midrashim, he became a king for 40 years and all sorts. But it's interesting, those years, back to Annie's point, that we don't need to know it for the narrative. There's much not talked about in the Torah just because we don't need to know it. It doesn't have any relevance to us. But in the middle, when we talk about Moshe Rabbeinu getting married, there's this whole story which also seemingly doesn't have any relevance to us. Jethro, the daughters, they're being excommunicated, and he saves them. Well, so we're trying to paint Moshe as this great savior. I mean, what's the point of this pasuk? And further, that's all this is in. This is after Shlishi. This is pasuk 16 onwards.
Yeah.
And he saves them, and Yitro says to them, "Oh, bring the guy back in. Ish Mitzri, the Egyptian, bring the Egyptian back in." There seems to be something going on over here, which is shedding light onto the situation at large, and it needs to be analyzed to figure out exactly what the connection is with Yitro, what's the connection with Paro, and what's the connection to the story with Moshe. Again, I'll leave you with a question, something to think about over Shabbat. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll see you next week.
I just have to make a point that in Pasuk Kav Gimel, Perek Gimel, it says, "Vayehi bayamim harabim haim vayamot melech Mitzrayim." It doesn't say that the new king arose. Vayanchu bnei Yisrael min avodah. So therefore, here it's relevant. And previously, it was only relevant to say that there's a new king who did not know Yosef. That's Perush Ani.
Well, according to
I like it. I like it.
But according to Rashi, he says that the king feigned not knowing Moshe, not knowing Yosef.
That's why I said this is Perush Ani.
So it's the same person.
Perush Ani. Yashir Koch, Rabbi.
Rabbi,
Rabbi.
Once again, I'm not ready to go. That's just how good I like.
I know, it's very hard, Dan. It's
Leave
hard.
us behind.
It's hard.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good night.
Thank you, Rabbi.